think the moderator in this room is Amani. Amani, are you in the room? All right, I'm going to get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining today's presentation about why courts matter, particularly as it relates to our voting rights and concerns of that nature. I can actually hashtag this as elections have consequences. And so I hope that we're going to spend the next 45 minutes together. This is going to be a very interactive conversation. I do have a PowerPoint presentation to share with you, lots of visuals so that you can see what's happening around the federal courts. If you don't mind, can I get some folks to just send some messages there in the chat box? Let me know what state you live in. That would be very helpful to me throughout this presentation so I can speak to you directly and what's happening in your state. But my name is Kadida Kenner. I'm Director of Campaigns for the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. One of those campaigns being Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania. And although I traveled the state of Pennsylvania pre-COVID times, talking about the importance of the federal courts, I can talk about the courts not only for Pennsylvania, but federally as well, and what's happening in your states. And so I see some folks jumping in there. Christine is from New York, Carolyn from Illinois. Oh, great, North Carolina. I just moved back to Pennsylvania from Charlotte, North Carolina. So hello, Lydia. All right, great to see some of you in this room today. I'm going to share this PowerPoint presentation with you right now, and I thank you all for joining me. As I said, please feel free to interrupt at any time. I want to keep this conversation lively and upbeat. I am not a lawyer, an attorney. I am a journalist by trade, and I came upon this work because I believe in protecting our independent judiciary. I know that as a Black woman, many of my rights have been granted, and many of my rights have been taken away by the federal courts. And so I got into this work trying to secure democracy with many of you who are watching this today. So I'm going to share my presentation. I hope this works. If someone can please let me know. I hope the moderator is here to let me know that it's working well. All right. Hopefully you all can hear me and see this. I think that in your panel, you can double click on this presentation and it will make the presentation larger and me smaller so you can actually see these slides. So here we go. Let's get started. So why courts matter? Let's talk about this. I always like to start these presentations by lifting up this quote by Frederick Douglass. And at one point he said that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will. And so this quote went on, but I think it's very important for us to talk about this today. As you learn more information about the federal courts, it's important for us to know that when we get this information, we have to do something about it. And we have to demand to power what it is we want to see change. So let's get into it. So our civil and human rights, what are at stake? If you can, I can't really see them right now, but if you don't mind, please go into the chat box and let us know what your concerns were when you woke up that November 9th morning, I believe it was, November 9th on 2016. What concerns did you have when you woke up that morning? What were your fears as it relates to what could change in our country? I'd love to see those comments in the chat. I want to talk about what's at stake and what's at stake as it relates to our federal courts. So there's a lot of our civil and human rights are at stake. As I mentioned early on, the reason I got into this work is because I believe in our independent judiciary. I know that it's usually the last arbiter of justice. It's where people go for justice. And so if we are under attack, if our Supreme Court and our lower courts are under attack by an administration who wants to take away many of our civil and human rights, these are the things that are at stake, and these are the things that matter as it relates to us needing to vote. And so we'll talk about that in a second. But I know for me, when I woke up that November 9th morning, I had many concerns about what was going to happen to the Supreme Court, who would be taking those positions once judges retire or if they pass away, as that has happened here already in the last 3.5 years. And then I had concerns about health care. I had concerns about civil rights and human rights. I had concerns about my LGBTQ friends. I had concerns about the environment, reproductive justice, economic justice. So lots of concerns in play here as it relates to the courts and why it's important that we vote down ballot so that we can secure an independent judiciary. So I want to show you a few examples of what it is as it relates to what the federal courts will do. Here's an example of what we get out of the Supreme Court, what we get out of our lower federal courts. And that is that the Supreme Court, will hear challenges to take away the ACA. It's important. The courts matter. The decisions that are made, are important for our lives. A lot of us do advocacy on many issues. And if you're doing advocacy on so many of these different issues, you should also do advocacy around protecting the independent judiciary. Here in Pennsylvania, where I am today, I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the capital of Pennsylvania. And the Supreme Court actually heard a case, or they decided not to hear a case, I should say, as it relates to COVID mitigation about our governor and what he wanted to put into place to close businesses down. So our federal courts will hear cases that reflect what's happening in our own states. Here's another one in which here in Pennsylvania, our Attorney General wanted to make sure that the Supreme Court would hear a case about birth control and making sure that women can continue to have access to reproductive justice. There's another one here, too, about the federal courts that will hear cases about funding for sanctuary cities. Here in Philadelphia, we are a sanctuary city. And the federal government under the Trump administration was interested in halting funding to cities that are sanctuary cities. These are more opportunities of which federal courts hear cases that impact our lives. Here's a good one from Charlotte, North Carolina. Some young folks here expressing their rights through free speech, through covering their mouths, which is actually illegal to do, especially if you're in DC inside the Capitol, is to cover your mouth. But these young students talking about they're wanting to vote and not have their rights and their voting rights suppressed. And I can tell you, as someone who did work in 2016 in North Carolina, and we heard about what Governor Pat McCrory was trying to do during those times, where he wanted to find out exactly how it was that African Americans voted in elections. He asked the Board of Elections, how do African Americans vote? When the Board of Elections told him how African Americans vote, and they said on Sundays, after church and early voting, that's exactly how they tried to suppress and stop the vote in North Carolina. There's other matters that, we all care about. We care about what's happening with our environment, gas pipelines, et cetera, happening and perhaps in the areas in which you live. Cases are heard there from the Supreme Court and our lower courts. Cases of immigration, asylum seekers, and what's happening to children in cages. These are all things that will be heard by our federal courts. And again, if it's talking about what as it relates to the current administration, the Trump administration, and what the powers of the presidency has, the Supreme Court will hear those cases as well. So I set this here for you today. I want you, if you can, to read this out loud to yourselves. This is super important. You'll see elections have consequences there at the top. But what you see here is a picture of at least 3 Supreme Court justices that may actually retire in the next 4 years. So I'll read this to you. Donald Trump says that he might get to replace 3 more Supreme Court justices. And I have there, try sleeping tonight. As we know, this current administration has already confirmed 2 Supreme Court justices. There's an opportunity for him to also have 3 more, if not more than 3, more Supreme Court justices in the next 4 years. Whoever is elected next to the presidency in November may have the opportunity to put 3 more Supreme Court judges on a bench. And so I show you pictures here of Clarence Thomas there in the bottom right. And I show you Clarence Thomas because it's been rumored he was going to resign even last year. We were hearing that he might resign. That didn't happen just yet. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the notorious RBG, who many of us probably pray for nightly. She was, she's had some health challenges. She's overcome a lot. She has a really good workout regimen, probably a better workout regimen than myself. And so she's hanging in there. And then Justice Sotomayor, folks always ask why I have Justice Sotomayor up in the upper right-hand corner. And she's just relatively new to the bench in the last less than dozen years. And she has type 1 diabetes. And Donald Trump says that she's not healthy and he may get to replace her at some point. So here's 3. And just knowing there's other judges that currently sit on the bench who can decide to resign at any time. Here's an example of a judicial crisis that's happening under this administration. We have a picture here of the notorious RBG and Justice Sotomayor. And we have opportunities in which this current administration is saying that these judges are too liberal and want them to recuse themselves from cases. And this is based on nothing. So we have to ensure that we are protecting our independent judiciary and our Supreme Court justices on the bench. So I have a little video here I want to share. I hope this works well.
But something that people aren't talking about is how many judges we've had approved, whether it be the Court of Appeals, circuit judges, whether it be district judges. We got a great justice, Justice Gorsuch, into the United States Supreme Court. He is going to be outstanding, hopefully, for many, many years. We will set records in terms of the number of judges. That has consequences 40 years out, depending on the age of the judge, but 40 years out. So numerous have been approved. Many, many are in the pipeline. The level of quality is extraordinary. There has never been anything like what we've been able to do together with judges.
All right. So I like to share that video for us to realize the consequences of elections. And if you've ever played that game, Two Truths and a Lie, you know, in your younger years or even now, you'll know that there is some truth to his statements. Donald Trump has confirmed more than 200 federal judges in less than 4 years in office. That is almost a record for any president in American history at confirming judges at a record clip, as he has. He's confirmed a lot of federal judges, and we'll get to talk about that in a second. But elections have consequences. And so it's very important that we recognize that when we're going into the polls and we're voting the top of the ticket, we need to realize that the bottom of the ticket is also impactful. We're going to talk about that in just a second. So here's a tweet. I don't know if any of you are on Twitter. I hope you are, and you can follow Courts Matter PA. They're on Twitter. But I do follow what this administration has to say. This was a tweet that was sent out back in May from this administration, touting the fact that federal judges are being confirmed at a record clip and that there are a record amount of judges. Unfortunately, the president here has listed 252 federal judges. That's not a completely accurate number. At this point here in August, he's actually only confirmed 203 federal judges. I'm not sure what other level of federal judges he's referring to here, but 203 federal judges have been confirmed under this administration, Article 3 judges. And so you'll see here that there's other tweets that have gone out by others who sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Kamala Harris being one of those, Senator Kamala Harris, Senator Mazie Hirono, both sitting on the Senate Judiciary Committee, asking why this administration was in the throes of confirming judges in the midst of the COVID pandemic. These tweets are from April, when many of us were still in our homes, quarantining in our homes, and yet the Senate was back in session strictly to confirm judges, not to provide any COVID relief for the states and for our country, but to actually confirm more judges, because it is a top priority of this administration. So I want to, if I can, just take you back a little bit to Civics 101. I know a lot of us haven't had this lesson since maybe the 10th or 11th grade, and I know that's been some time for me. And so I quickly want to just give you a rehash of what federal judges are all about, how many there are, and the different levels of federal judges. And so we're all pretty accustomed and aware to the Supreme Court of the United States. We know that there's only one Supreme Court, that there are 9 justices that sit on the Supreme Court, and that they hear only 1% of cases. So you have a better likelihood of maybe even winning the lottery than you do of actually winning your case being heard by the Supreme Court. And so what happens is, because the Supreme Court does not hear so many cases, most cases are decided by our appellate courts, our circuit courts of appeal, and there's 13 of those. I happen to live in Pennsylvania, and so I am part of the Third Circuit Court of Appeal. And besides the circuit courts of appeal, there are also those folks who sit on those benches, usually are the folks who actually get elevated to the Supreme Court. So Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, both were on appellate courts, both elevated to the Supreme Court under this administration. So it's very important that we not only protect the Supreme Court, but protect the independence of our circuit courts, because that's where Supreme Court justices like to come from. And then there's our district courts. And so I like to give an example of this, of how different cases are heard or what level of courts they're heard in. And I'll give you an example of the case of the frozen trucker. You may have heard about this frozen trucker case, the Trans Am trucking. And it was a trucking case out of Colorado in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. There was a truck driver who was driving his tractor trailer in a cold cold evening in Colorado. It was below 0 degrees. His cab, his trailer, actually the brakes went out on his trailer, and so he pulled aside, called into his job and said, it's cold out here. I'm very cold. My trailer has gone down. There's no heat in my cab. I want to leave my trailer. I want to drive away. He drove away and left his trailer behind, so to save his life, because he was freezing to death. And he was fired from his job for leaving his trailer behind. When he was fired from his job, he took that case to a district court in Colorado. The district court heard that case. It was a federal case because Trans Am Trucking operates in multiple states, which made it a federal case. Now, if this trucking company only operated in one state, it would probably be heard by a state court. But because Trans Am Trucking operates in multiple states, it was a federal case. It went to the district courts. The district courts ruled in favor of the truck driver. They agreed that, yes, save your life, leave your trailer behind, drive your cab away, and save your life. Well, Trans Am Trucking decided that they want to appeal that decision, and they took it to the appellate courts. They took it to the appellate courts there in Colorado, and the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals heard that case. They also agreed with the district courts, but there was one dissenting vote on that appellate court who believed that the company had the right to fire the truck driver, even though he was about to lose his life in freezing conditions. That one judge sitting on the appellate courts was Neil Gorsuch, current Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. And so you have an example of exactly the kind of justices and judges that are being elevated under this administration. So nationally, here we are. This is as of August 6th. There have been no confirmations since that time. There's actually 201 Trump administration confirmed judges that are confirmed. There's 2 for the international courts, is the number I gave you earlier of 203. But 201 Trump administration confirmed judges, 2 on the Supreme Court, 53 on the very important Circuit Courts of Appeals. And you need to know that again, because that's where Supreme Court justices come from, and that's where most cases stop. Your case is not going to hit the United States Supreme Court, and you'll get a final decision there at the Circuit Court level. And then 146 judges on the district courts. There are nominees going through the process right now. There are 70 federal judicial vacancies, and there's also some folks pending on the floor. And a lot of times someone will ask, how did the Trump administration get to put so many judges on the bench? Well, when the Obama administration was in their last 2 years, they were unable to confirm judges. Mitch McConnell would not bring judges up for hearings, not only for hearings, but not bring them to the floor for a full Senate vote. And so when the Obama administration ended and Trump came into power, he was left with more than 140 vacancies on the courts in which he's been able to fill rapidly. So here's an example for those of you out there. I know someone from Illinois is out there with us today, North Carolina. You see where you live in the 7th Circuit, the 4th Circuit. Here I am in the 3rd. And so it's very important to know some dubious distinctions about many of these circuits. The 7th Circuit, for example, that has the city of Chicago in it, does not have one Black circuit court judge sitting on the bench. Here you have Chicago, Illinois, in the midst of the 7th Circuit, and not one Black judge sits there. The 3rd Circuit, of which I live, Pennsylvania, is the second worst as it relates to women sitting on the bench, where there are very few women who sit on the 3rd Circuit Court of Appeals in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, U.S. Virgin Islands, Delaware, of which I am. And it used to be at one time the 5th Circuit, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas, had a horrible list of folks who were not folks of color sitting on the bench, and they've been able to actually confirm some as of late, whereas you don't have that in the 7th Circuit. So there is an opportunity to have some judicial diversity on the benches, and that's very important to have that judicial diversity on the bench, and not only just racial diversity, but diversity in profession. It's important that we have circuit court judges that don't just come from corporate law. Maybe they were attorneys representing, folks in the state, defending the good for all civil rights attorneys. But right now we're getting lots of corporate attorneys sitting on the court benches right now. And women. It's important to have women sit on the federal court benches. Studies have proven that when a woman sit on a panel of a federal court panel, the male judges pay more attention to cases, particularly cases involving civil rights. So again, the quick process, how a judge becomes a judge. And I say this is how the process used to be. Things have changed under this current administration. It's not as it used to be. At one point, it was the home state senators would send a name to the White House and say, I like this judge, this state judge. I like this professor at this University of Pennsylvania. I like this lower court judge who I think should be elevated to a different level. That's how it used to be. The two senators in lots of states would get together, get a name, send it to the president, at which time the president would then make the official nomination. After the president makes the official nomination, it goes to the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. There's 22 folks who sit, there's 22 senators who sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. You just need a simple majority to move a nominee out of the Senate Judiciary Committee onto the full Senate floor for a full vote. And as you can imagine right now, there are 12 Republicans who currently sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee and 10 Democrats. And therefore, you don't need any bipartisanship at this moment. You don't need one Democratic vote to allow for a judge to move, or for a nominee to move from the Senate Judiciary Committee to the full Senate vote. No partisanship is required right now to make a judge a judge. Then it goes to the full Senate floor, where all 100 senators vote on every single federal judge. So although this may be a senator who lives in Pennsylvania, this senator in Pennsylvania is going to vote about a judge that would sit in Chicago. So it's important that we realize that elections have consequences, and not just the top of the ticket, but also the bottom of the ticket. And when you're voting for U.S. senators, just know that U.S. senators vote for all these federal judges. And then once they get a simple majority, so 50 votes plus the vice president if necessary, or 51 votes, the simple majority, they are confirmed, and they are confirmed for a lifetime. These are lifetime seats. And so I want to bring to your attention the fact that under this current administration, we are getting very unqualified judges, not only being appointed or going through the process, but actually being confirmed. And this is an older graphic. The numbers have actually expanded since this time. The American Bar Association, since 1985, has given ratings to more than 7,000 folks who wanted to be federal judges. 7,000. Of the 7,000, when this graphic was created, they had only rated 4 of those folks unanimously unqualified to do the job. So think about that. So more than 30 years of rating judges only found 4 unanimously not qualified folks to be federal judges. So under this administration, 2 of those belong to Donald Trump. The other 2 actually belong to George W. Bush. The difference is George W. Bush's unqualified candidates never saw the federal bench. They were not confirmed. Donald Trump has actually confirmed almost a dozen not qualified rated judges to the federal bench. They are currently sitting on the bench today. History being made in this administration. For example, Jonathan Cobbs, now a U.S. Circuit Court judge, was confirmed by the vote of 51 to 50. For the first time in American history, the vice president was called in to break a tie to allow a judge to be a lifetime judge. That had never happened prior to this administration. Mike Pence came in and broke the tie 51-50 to make Jonathan Cobbs a federal judge for a lifetime. In the past, that judge just would not have been confirmed. If they can't get the votes, they just would not have been confirmed. And if we want to talk about hypocrisy of what's happening on the current federal court benches, at one point when Senator Chuck Grassley out of Iowa was the Senate Judiciary Committee chairman, he believed that lifetime appointments were too important to rubber stamp, and that we should have some consensus nominees, and that we should have bipartisan support. He believed that in 2011. But currently what's happening is that is not the case. We have folks who are being confirmed, as you see, historically, with vice presidents breaking ties. Confirmed judges confirm fears. I want you to know that there has been federal judges that have been confirmed, that have confirmed our fears. Judges that we said out loud, they'd be problematic. They'd be problematic if they were appointed judges, and yet they were confirmed anyway, and you're going to see the consequences of their actions. Here are 3 that we've been able to defeat prior to them becoming judges. So there has been some success in stopping very problematic judges from reaching the federal court level. The gentleman on the far right, his name is Brett Talley. He's not even quite 40 years old yet. He was a nominee for a federal bench. Brett Talley, in his spare time, likes to blog in favor of the KKK and defend them when necessary. Jeff Mateer here in the center, Jeff Mateer believed that transgender children are the work of Satan. This is someone who wanted to sit on a federal bench one day, could see your child, your LGBTQ child, and believe that your child is the work of Satan. And then the gentleman on the left, Peterson, he is someone who never tried a case in his life, never held a deposition on his own, yet they wanted to make him a federal judge. These guys are all early 40s or younger, which means they would sit on the bench for 40 years. The circuit courts, the federal courts are not a place to learn on the job. They should have the experience and be the independent judicial folks that we need to sit on these benches. We've got some folks here joining us from North Carolina, near and dear to me, North Carolina. There's an opportunity in which our advocacy has stopped someone from reaching a federal bench. Thomas Farr, many of you may know who Thomas Farr is. He was is a Jesse Helms protege. We're all familiar with Jesse Helms, vote suppressing Jesse Helms. Thomas Farr, they wanted to put him what they call the Black Belt of North Carolina in the Eastern District of North Carolina. They call it the Black Belt because that's where a lot of Black voters live. They wanted to put Thomas Farr there on that bench. That bench has never seen a Black judge in history. There's never been a Black judge to sit on that bench during this nomination process for Thomas Farr. It was a slap in the face to folks who definitely live in North Carolina. This one had received a lot of pushback, and so we were able to stop Thomas Farr from being confirmed to the federal bench there in the Black Belt of North Carolina. And then there's this situation that's happening, and I know we're caring about voting rights in this time, and hopefully we're all also caring about Brown versus Board of Education. If we go back to our history lessons, we know that Brown versus Board of Education is an opportunity to end segregation here in this country as it relates to schooling and other, water fountains, etc. Walk into the front door of any establishment that you want instead of the back. Brown versus Board of Education. We currently have Trump's judges who will not say out loud, will not confirm out loud that the historic ruling of Brown versus Board of Education was correctly decided. During the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings, they will not confirm that Brown versus Board of Education was correctly decided. Very scary times. We talked earlier about those confirmed fears that we had with judges. These are some examples of folks who went, before the Senate Judiciary Committee and cried. You see the gentleman there on the left, Lawrence Van Dyke. He cried during his interview. That's what a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing is. It's an interview for a job on a federal bench. This gentleman cried when cross-examined and asked the question about the LGBTQ community. He had some really horrible rulings as a judge about where he stood on that community. And he cried during his interview and said that he had gay friends, that he would not be bad for the LGBTQ community. Yet the first opportunity that he had to hear a case involving someone who was transgender, he misgendered the individual on purpose. Another example, Judge James Ho here in the center, someone else we were very concerned about becoming a judge because of the way he ruled in favor of corporations and not in favor of people. As soon as he got on the bench, he had an opportunity to hear a case about worker disability, and he ruled exactly how we feared he would, in favor of corporations and not of people. So there's plenty of examples of our fears being confirmed with the judges that are being put on the bench. There was one here for Pennsylvania that was really concerning to us. His name is Stephanos Bibas. He was a University of Pennsylvania professor who is now a Circuit Court of Appeals judge for the Third Circuit. He believed that over-incarceration is not reflective of racial disparities in the justice system, but something in the liberal narrative. He believes that drug addiction is not a disease, but something that an addict, air quote that, addicts can choose to overcome. And then he also believes that prisoners should be forcibly conscripted to the military. These are examples of the types of judges who are sitting on the bench now under this current administration. And what's problematic, that many of you may care about out here watching this presentation today, is that we have a severe lack of diversity on the federal bench under this administration. I can tell you that under Donald Trump's administration, 76% of all federal judges he has confirmed are men, and 85% of those judges are white. And we do not live in a society that's 85% white or 76% male. And so where you see opportunities in which the Obama administration wanted to put some folks of color on the bench, they were never granted the hearings under Mitch McConnell and others. And so they sat there until the Obama administration ended, which left vacancies on the bench to only be replaced by Trump's nominees, none of which were of color. Cases, situations here for us in Pennsylvania, people we tried to stop from reaching federal benches, such as David Porter, an example of someone who opposed Justice Sotomayor's opportunity to sit on the Supreme Court. He worked with Senator Santorum here in Pennsylvania to try to stop that. Other problematic things, part of the Federalist Society, the Heritage Foundation, examples of dark money getting into our judicial process. So we tried to stop his confirmation process, but we were not very successful. We realized that we were going to have to do something extraordinary to stop his confirmation because we believed him to be so problematic. And I would be remiss not to mention Congressman John Lewis at this moment, who talked about not being afraid to speak up and speak out about what you believe in and having moral courage and getting into necessary trouble. And so we literally took this to heart more than 2 years ago. Many of us went down to DC and sat outside of Chuck Grassley's Senate Judiciary Committee office, demanding that he not confirm or not grant a hearing to this David Porter. You'll see myself there in the center. I can never hide my facial expressions. You'll know exactly how I'm feeling based on that. But we took a group from Pennsylvania down to DC. We sat in the hallways after we had sat in the office, reading out petition signatures, things that people had mentioned. And so we sat there and we read your names. We talked about why David Porter was a bad choice. When they were going to let us carry on inside Senator Chuck Grassley's office, we decided to take it out into the hallway. We took it out into the hallway, at which time, given a few warnings, we were then arrested for an act of civil disobedience, trying to stop a lower court appointment. To our knowledge, this was the first time in history any group had ever gone down to DC and in an act of civil disobedience trying to stop a lower court appointment that had been done in the past for Supreme Courts, perhaps, but never for lower court appointments. And you can see we all got taken away. We call ourselves the Porter Nine. There were 9 of us that got arrested that day. 14 of us went down. And we went and we spoke truth to power. We got into some good trouble. And we were released. We paid a small fine. It was a citation like a speeding ticket, and we all walked away safely. And although I don't, encourage everyone to take this step, it's not for everyone. I can tell you that I did feel safe as a Black woman. I did feel safe with Capitol Police, U.S. Capitol Police. They were respectful of our constitutional right to protest, although they did take us away. But it was an excellent opportunity just to express how important it is to protect our independent judiciary. And the 9 of us will be friends forever. And we were a cross of Pennsylvanians. I mean, we were younger, older, Black, white. We were Muslim, some not of faith, Christians, Jewish. I mean, we looked like America down there getting arrested that day. And then there was the Kavanaugh hearings and things that we all tried to, bring to light. The fact that Kavanaugh was a get-out-of-jail-free card for this administration. He was handpicked by the Federalist Society, the Heritage Foundation, and a list of 25 folks that the Donald Trump administration had to choose from. They chose Brett Kavanaugh. There's still investigations hopefully underway for Brett Kavanaugh as to who paid off his gambling debts, who paid off his mortgage and such, all the debts that he had at the moment that he became a Supreme Court judge. And so we did try to stop this. Again, more good trouble, more protests, more rallies, trying to defend democracy and save our Supreme Court. And then there was this moment. Many of you may have watched this. Many of you may remember the Anita Hill hearings. So many of you may have watched this hearing go with Brett Kavanaugh, as there were lots of accusations his way as it relates to his interview during the Senate Judiciary Committee. And so maybe you caught this if you watched C-SPAN that day.
That putting a GPS tracker on your car was an invasion. A new technology was an invasion of your property, and therefore was something that violated the Fourth Amendment. So, and was something.
So another opportunity to get into some good trouble. And as I stood up with two of my friends here that day and interrupted the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing for Brett Kavanaugh, I jumped up and I said, it's time to get in the way of this administration. Good trouble, good trouble. This was more than 2 years ago. And so it's important that when we think about us having the opportunity to vote here in the coming months, that we keep in mind that elections have consequences. Not only, again, are you voting for the top of the ticket, you're voting for the bottom of the ticket and down to your state reps, etc. These are all the folks that are going to have an opportunity to decide who sits on our federal benches. I have just a few more moments here, so I wanted to skip through this and just get to some of the Q&A that many of you may have. I'll stop my share. And hopefully I come back to you. All right. Okay, so I'm back here, and I have my friend Baird Rustin. I don't know if many of you are familiar with Baird Rustin, the proof that one truly believes is an action. Baird Rustin was organizer of the March on Washington '63 for Jobs and Freedom. Also a Pennsylvanian, so I like to elevate that from my hometown. So I'd love to hear from you out there what questions you have, how it is that you can talk about the courts when you are talking to folks about wanting to vote and needing to vote. You can talk about the courts. I know when I knocked on doors in North Carolina in 2016, when I came across folks who said they would not vote at the top of the ticket, I reminded them that they needed to vote down that ticket because of the importance of the federal courts and the fact that our U.S. senators vote on every single federal judge. So I'd love to hear from you. I'll go up the chat box here and see if there were any questions that I may have missed. Yeah. So I see, Carolyn, thank you for your comments. I would love to hear from any of you who are joining out there watching. What questions do you have? I have 6 more minutes with you. I'd love to talk to you about the federal courts. It's very important to me, so I'd love to talk to you about it. And Monty, did I miss anything while I was on the PowerPoint? No, no questions. Did I answer everything for you? Nobody has any questions. That's a first. All right. Well, I can tell you that, as this was labeled how elections impact judicial appointments. Oh, I see Chuck Williams here with a question. How can we begin the process of reviewing local judges that may one day become federal judges? Good question. It really just depends on what state you live in. Some of you, most states actually don't get to vote for their state judges. There's commissions or the governor appoints in many states. Chuck, can you tell me what state you live in? If you don't mind, just tell me that information. I can tell you, though, if you live in a state like mine, Pennsylvania, where we actually vote for our judges, North Carolina votes for their judges, Maryland, okay, that, it's important to find out more information about these judges. I can tell you that prior to joining Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania, I would go into the polling location and I would see the names of the judges listed and I wouldn't know who I was voting for. I was an ill-informed voter as it relates to the judiciary. To be completely transparent and honest, most times I would just vote for the woman because I would assume that the woman would do a better job on the bench. But now what we can do to review judges, especially the local judges, because they can one day be elevated, is we have so much information at our fingertips. We can Google these folks. We have mail-in ballot opportunities, absentee ballot opportunities where we can sit home with our ballots and we can Google these judges and find out what they do on the weekends. Are they with the Boys and Girls Club on Saturday or are they at the golf tournament? What are they doing with their spare time? What associations do they belong to? Are they part of the Federalist Society or the Heritage Foundation? Are they someone who doesn't have the judicial independence to be a good judge? Maybe there's someone who's going to be elevated from like the common pleas judge level to maybe like the Supreme Court level in the states. How have they ruled in previous cases? Are they someone who speaks out against Black Lives Matter? Are they someone who speaks out against Colin Kaepernick and taking a knee? There's lots of ways in which we can actually Google information about these judges. We can also go to where they've been rated the American Bar Association, and others who have taken into account, these folks' records and talked to their colleagues about where they stand on issues, or not necessarily where they stand on issues, but their temperament as judges. Do they come to work on time? I mean, that's some of the reasons for the ABA of why some of these judges didn't get really good ratings. They just didn't show up to work on time, or they didn't have good temperament at work, and they weren't trusted by colleagues. So there's a lot of opportunities for you just to use Google as your friend. Find out what these judges do in their spare time. That's how I make my determinations. I like to also Google rulings they've made. When I heard that a local judge here to me in Pennsylvania spoke out very negatively against Colin Kaepernick, I decided that that wasn't somebody that I would not want to one day get the chance to go in front of. So there's an opportunity for you to review these local judges, because yes, they can become federal judges. This is where federal judges come from. You have commissions in lots of states where your U.S. senators will get together and say, I like this judge who sits on this lower court here in my state, and who sits on the lower court here in Prince George County, and I want to make this person a federal judge. So just do your homework. We ask that you do your homework. We have time this election to do our homework. We have the means to Google and research these folks, and just know that your advocacy matters. I usually end these presentations by saying, get busy. It's not just enough to vote anymore. You have to encourage others and let them know what you heard today. Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania. We're just one small little organization that is not even funded anymore to do this work. Prior to COVID, I traveled the state talking about the importance of the judiciary. This information is not really known to a lot of folks. When's the last time you heard this kind of detail about what's happening on the federal bench? So it's important now. You've all been deputized. You all have heard this information. You'll never forget it. You'll never unsee it. And so I ask that you take this information forward and protect our Supreme Court. Protect Brown versus Board of Education. Protect the Voting Rights Act. Protect all of these cases that are important to our human and civil rights. Our human and civil rights are at stake during this election. So if you don't want to vote the top of the ticket for some apparent reason, make sure you vote down bottom, because our U.S. senators will put into place all of these federal judges or not. And so the action you can take today is reach out to your U.S. senator. Do a little investigating about how your U.S. senator has voted on these Donald Trump judges, on these problematic judges who don't believe in Brown versus Board of Education. Tell them that you are a courts voter and that you're going to vote based upon protecting the independence of our judiciary. That's where our rights have been granted and taken away, and we must protect it at all costs. We must protect it. And I thank you all for being with me today. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I'll continue to do this work until we get a Black woman on the Supreme Court, because it is necessary to have that experience on the bench, and it's about time. So thank you all. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I guess now we're going back to the stage. Thank you all for your time today.